The first night after Jess moved out, the apartment felt like it had been hollowed out. Our shared things were gone, her mugs, her throw blankets, even the ridiculous pink spatula she insisted made pancakes taste better. I sat in the middle of our now echoey living room, half lost in the absence of her voice, and fully unsure what to do with my hands. I knew we were over. I also knew I'd been the one to end it. But knowing and feeling are two very different beasts, and my heart hadn't caught up to the decision my mouth made 2 weeks earlier. We'd been together 3 years. The kind of relationship that had playlists and secret nicknames and arguments about whose turn it was to buy oat milk. But somewhere along the way, love turned into logistics. We became excellent roommates and terrible partners. It wasn't a blow-up or betrayal that ended us. It was the slow, suffocating unraveling that left no fight, just silence. When she left, she hugged me. That was the strangest part. She held on just long enough to make me think she might whisper something, anything, but she didn't. Then she walked out, and the door clicked shut behind her like a final period on a sentence we couldn't rewrite. I didn't cry, which felt wrong. Instead, I picked up the remote and scrolled through 3 hours of shows I didn't care about. That night, I tried to sleep on my side of the bed. Habit. But the cold side was everywhere. I kept expecting to hear her laugh from the kitchen, the way it used to echo down the hallway when she found something absurd on TikTok. But there was nothing. Just the hum of the fridge and the occasional sound of my own breathing. The next morning, I started packing. We'd agreed I'd keep the apartment, cheaper for her to find something new, she said. I had no idea she'd be so fast about it. In the bedroom closet, wedged between my winter coat and a forgotten yoga mat, was a shoebox I didn't recognize. I almost didn't notice it. It was plain, taped shut once, but the seal had worn away. No label, no markings, just a tiny crease along the top like it had been opened and resealed. Curious, I sat cross-legged on the floor and pulled it onto my lap. Inside were small things. A movie stub from our first date. A photo booth strip where our faces blurred from laughing too hard. A napkin with a doodle of a cat in a coffee cup, her joke from that one lazy Sunday when we binge-watched documentaries we didn't understand. I smiled. Then I frowned. Because tucked beneath those memories was an envelope. On the front, in her handwriting, were 3 words, "If you're moving." I froze. My thumb brushed the seal, and for a second, I thought maybe I shouldn't open it. But of course, I did. And what she wrote inside wasn't a goodbye. It was something else entirely. It started with, "I know you won't find this until you're packing, which means by now, I'm gone, and you're probably feeling one of 2 things, either relieved or a little too calm, which means the grief hasn't hit yet. It will. And when it does, I don't want you to call me. Not because I hate you, I don't. I could never. But because this letter is the only thing I need to say to you, and maybe the only thing I never could when I had the chance." I had to read that first paragraph twice. Her handwriting curled slightly at the ends, like it always did when she was trying to be careful with her words. I could almost hear her voice in the pauses. She continued, "You're probably wondering why I left all of this, why I kept the stub, the photo, the dumb napkin. It's because for a long time, I really believed we'd make it. Not in the fairy tale way, not in the loud fireworks and running through airports way, but in the quiet, certain, you're my person way. I think we were that. Until we weren't." I paused and looked at the napkin again. The ink had faded a little, but I remembered the moments so clearly. She'd drawn it after we ordered in Thai food, and the delivery guy handed us extra fortune cookies because we were laughing so much. I hadn't thought about that night in ages. The letter continued. "When you started pulling away, I told myself it was just a season. People get distant. Work gets busy. Sleep gets hard. But then the distance stayed. And I stopped asking you to close the space. I stopped asking for anything, actually. And that scared me more than losing you. Because it meant I was already letting go. There it was. The part one hadn't let myself admit. I thought ending it first meant I was in control. But reading this, it hit me, I hadn't been ahead of the end. I'd just been the first to say it out loud. Jess had already been grieving us while I was still pretending nothing was wrong. You never cheated. You never yelled. You never stopped showing up physically. But emotionally? You left the room months before I packed my bags. And I stayed hoping you'd notice. Hoping you'd fight for it. But you didn't. And when you finally said we needed to break up, all I could think was, finally. And then, I wish you had said it sooner. My throat tightened. Because she was right. I didn't leave in one motion. I slowly faded. And she noticed every second of it. The letter was 6 pages long. Every word soft, deliberate, written like someone who still loved me but needed to walk away anyway. Then came the line that changed everything. "There's one thing I need to tell you, something I kept to myself because I didn't want it to be a reason for you to stay. I found out I was pregnant in February." My hands went cold. Pregnant. The word hit me like a wrong note in a quiet room. I blinked at the page, as if that might make it say something else. But there it was, plain as day, ink pressed just a little harder on those 3 syllables, like her hand had shaken while writing it. I found out I was pregnant in February, she'd written. And I didn't tell you because I already knew we were unraveling. I didn't want to fix us with a baby. I didn't want to bring someone new into the world hoping they'd glue 2 broken people back together. My breath caught somewhere between shock and guilt. She hadn't even told me. That part sat heavy on my chest, more than the news itself. That she had gone through that moment alone. Before you spiral, the letter went on, I lost it. Not by choice. It happened in March. Quietly. In the middle of the night while you were asleep in the next room. I didn't wake you. I don't know why. Maybe I didn't want to see your face shift in that way, half love, half panic. So I sat on the bathroom floor, wrapped in a towel, holding my knees, and I said goodbye to something I had only just met. I felt like the air had been pulled from the room. I remembered that night. She said she had cramps, took a heating pad to the couch and waved me off when I offered to bring tea. I fell asleep thinking she just needed rest. I never even asked if she was okay the next morning. I want to be clear, she wrote. I'm not telling you this to punish you. I'm telling you because it happened. Because it shaped me in ways I'm still trying to understand. And because part of me needed you to know, even if the other part was too afraid of how you'd react. I rested the letter on my lap, the paper warm from my hands. My chest ached, not just from the loss I never knew we'd had, but from the realization that I'd missed everything that mattered because I was too busy avoiding discomfort. Jess had walked through grief, uncertainty, even hope, all while I'd been emotionally checked out. I handled it, the letter continued. I went to the doctor. I told my sister. I cried a little. Then I went back to pretending everything was fine because I wasn't ready to face the reality that you and I were no longer us. I needed to be strong enough to leave without needing you to chase me. I closed my eyes. I didn't deserve her strength, not the way I'd received it. She'd been kind when she had every reason to be angry. Quiet when she could have been vengeful. She didn't lash out. She just left with dignity. Maybe you're reading this and feeling something, she wrote. Maybe you're not. That's okay. I'm not writing this for closure or clarity. I'm writing it so you don't walk around for the rest of your life thinking you lost nothing. You didn't. You lost me. And we lost something else, too. I felt the sting behind my eyes, sudden and sharp. But the tears didn't fall. Not yet. I folded the letter back into its envelope and placed it gently in the box. The shoebox was no longer just nostalgia. It was a time capsule of everything I hadn't seen while I was too busy being afraid of feeling. Then I saw it, one more piece of paper tucked at the bottom. Folded differently. It was addressed simply. Open this after you finish packing. The second note was shorter. Folded into a tight square like a secret past in class, the kind we used to exchange in the early days when we were still figuring each other out through scribbled jokes and movie quotes. The paper felt different, thicker, almost like stationery. And the handwriting wasn't steady like before. It was messy, rushed. If you're reading this, it means you've packed the last of your things, and the apartment is almost empty. I imagine it's quiet. It always felt too quiet without music playing. I used to wait until you left for work and then blast those sad girl playlists I pretended to hate. Truth is, I loved them. Especially the ones that sounded like someone whispering a secret in your ear. I stood in the hallway, the last of my boxes stacked by the door, keys in my pocket. The room really did feel hollow. The echo when I shifted my feet made it sound like I didn't belong there anymore. This isn't a goodbye letter, the note continued. That was the other one. This is something else. Something I need you to know before you lock the door behind you. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left because I loved myself enough to know I couldn't stay and wait to be chosen again. My stomach dropped. She always had a way of phrasing things that made the truth feel like poetry and a punch to the gut at the same time. I watched you drift, she wrote. Not once, but gradually. Like a tide pulling away so slowly I couldn't even yell after it. And I told myself over and over that it was just a phase. That you'd come back. But I spent months waiting for the sound of your keys in the door to mean something again. And when they didn't, I knew I had to go. I sat down on the floor, right where our old rug used to be. The one she bought even though I said it didn't match anything we owned. She laughed and said, it doesn't have to match. It just has to feel right under our feet. I missed that laugh. I missed 100 little things I hadn't realized were disappearing until they were all gone. I packed in silence, the letter said. You were at work. I took my time. Sat with every object like it might say something. And then I left the box and the notes because I couldn't leave without leaving something of myself behind. A breadcrumb. A truth. Maybe a mirror, too. And then, one last line. Don't come find me. Not now. If you do, make sure it's not because you're lonely, but because you've finally learned how to stay. I stared at the words for a long time. My chest felt cracked open in the best and worst way. She hadn't left the door ajar. She'd left a window, just enough to let the air in, not enough to crawl back through. I folded the note and placed it carefully back into the shoebox. I stood up, walked to the door, and just before locking it for the last time, I turned around and whispered, "I'm sorry." I don't know who I was saying it to, her, the ghost of our love, or the version of me that hadn't known how to hold something so gentle. I closed the door behind me, or I thought I did, because 3 weeks later, a package showed up at my new place. No return address. No note. Just one thing inside. It was the pink spatula. The ridiculous, cartoon-colored spatula she swore made everything taste better, especially pancakes. I laughed when I saw it, but not the kind of laugh that comes from something funny. It was softer, almost like my body needed a way to let go of the ache that had settled in my chest since that last letter. The spatula was wrapped in a dish towel we'd bought together on impulse at a farmer's market. It had little lemons printed across it and the phrase "Squeeze the Day" in bold, happy letters. I remembered teasing her about it, saying it was peak Pinterest energy. She'd stuck her tongue out at me and said, "Just wait, you'll smile every time you see it." And I did. Still did. Underneath the spatula was a Polaroid. I blinked when I saw it. It was of us, taken sometime last year, mid-laugh, our heads thrown back, a bottle of wine between us on the coffee table. I couldn't remember who had taken it. Maybe her sister? Maybe we set up a timer. But what caught my attention most was the handwriting on the back. It was her, again. Same soft loops. "You weren't all bad. In fact, you were magic, once." It didn't feel cruel. It felt like grace. Like she wanted to remind me that I wasn't a villain, just someone who lost the plot for a while. I sat on my couch, spatula in hand, Polaroid balanced on my knee, and realized something strange. I hadn't cried since reading the letters. I'd felt everything else, guilt, nostalgia, warmth, regret, but no tears. Until now. They came slow and hot, surprising in their silence. I didn't sob. I didn't shake. I just let them fall. And when they were done, I finally understood. Grief doesn't always announce itself with noise. Sometimes, it whispers through the everyday. Through spatulas and dish towels and tiny photographs of a version of yourself you're not sure you'll ever be again. That weekend, I baked pancakes. From scratch. Her recipe. I even played that sad girl playlist she used to love. I didn't eat at the table. I sat on the kitchen floor, back against the cabinets, played on my lap, and talked to her like she was still there. I told her I was sorry. That I should have shown up sooner. That I missed the way she narrated the weather or made up stories about strangers we saw at coffee shops. I told her I wasn't ready to love anyone else, not yet. But maybe one day I would be. And that if that day came, I hoped whoever she was within would make her laugh the way I once did. I left the empty plate in the sink and placed the spatula back in the drawer. Not to forget, but to remember in a different way. That night, I went to bed lighter. But the story wasn't quite finished. Because 2 days later, I got an email. From an address I didn't recognize. Subject line, about the baby. I stared at the subject line for what felt like 10 full minutes. About the baby. 4 words. Not capitalized. Not urgent looking. Just there. Plain as a whisper, but loud in my chest. The email address was unfamiliar, just a string of letters and numbers, not her name. But something in me knew. It was her. I clicked. There was no greeting, no sign-off. Just this. Before you ask, no. This isn't me trying to reopen anything. I just need to say one last thing. I lied. Not about being pregnant. Not about the loss. But about going through it alone. You were there. I stopped breathing for a second. You were there. You held me. You stayed up with me. You cried with me. We sat in the hallway while I bled and you kept saying, "It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay." Even when we both knew it wasn't. The world tilted slightly. I reread it, then again. I didn't remember that. None of it. I had no memory of holding her, or that night, or even her crying. I remembered her saying she had cramps. I remembered falling asleep. But not this. "I didn't want to tell you," she wrote, "because it felt like a betrayal of what we had. I know you don't remember. That's not your fault. You couldn't. You weren't meant to." I sat up straight. "I used the clinic," she said. "Not like you think. Not to erase everything. Just one night. That night. I thought I could carry the grief if I didn't have to carry the image of you breaking down beside me. I wanted to be the strong one. I wanted to hold that pain alone. I thought it would protect you. I thought it would protect me." My jaw went slack. The clinic. The same one I'd read about in a late-night rabbit hole once. A place where people could opt to forget a memory, not erased exactly, but scrubbed just enough. A fuzzy patch in time. Some called it dangerous. Others called it mercy. I had never believed it was real. Until now. "You kept asking what happened that night," she wrote. "And I told you I couldn't talk about it. The truth is, I literally couldn't. I gave it away. Gave away the worst night of my life like it was a splinter. But here's the irony. I still felt the pain. The grief didn't leave. Just the details did. That's the thing about memory. You can forget what happened, but your body doesn't forget what it felt. I looked around my apartment like I might find answers in the furniture. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure what to do with this kind of revelation. Then came the last line. I'm sorry for not letting you remember with me. But maybe now, knowing the truth, you'll understand why I had to go. Not because you didn't love me, but because you couldn't hold something you didn't even know you lost. I closed the laptop. The air felt thick. She had given me peace, and in doing so, kept the cost for herself. The night I thought she cried alone, I had cried with her. I just didn't know it. She had taken my memory to spare me, and now she'd returned the story without asking for anything in return. I sat there for a long time, listening to the silence. Then I did something I hadn't done since she left. I wrote her back. My reply wasn't long. It couldn't be. Anything I tried to write felt too small, too clumsy next to what she'd given me. But I had to try. I typed, deleted, retyped. Finally, I sent. I don't know what to say, except thank you. For protecting me. For telling me now. For loving me even when I didn't know how to show it back. I wish I could remember. I wish I had been strong enough to stay in that memory with you. I hope one day, if we ever speak again, it's not because we owe each other anything, but because we've both grown into people who can stand in hard moments without running. I'm so sorry for all of it. I hovered over the send button. Then I clicked. No fireworks. No typing dots. Just silence. But it was different now. Not the kind of silence that comes from loss. The kind that follows something honest. Like exhaling after holding your breath too long. I didn't expect her to respond. And for a while, she didn't. Days passed. A week. I went back to work. Caught up on emails. Answered texts I'd ignored. Life moved. Slowly. Then one night, I got a message. Not an email, a text. Just her name on my screen. My heart tripped over itself. It read, I won't come back. But I'll always be grateful we happened. That was it. And it was enough. More than enough. I stared at the message, then smiled. A real one. The kind that didn't hurt. I didn't respond. She didn't need me to. Some things deserve to rest. The next morning, I went through the last moving box I hadn't opened. It was mostly books. A few picture frames. And tucked in the side flap, a crumpled receipt from our first grocery trip together. We'd argued over almond butter versus peanut butter. She won. I kept both. I slipped the receipt into the back of a photo album I'd been too scared to open since the breakup. Not as a shrine, but as a reminder that some loves don't stay, but they still shape you. I didn't need to forget her to move on. I just needed to forgive myself for not knowing how to love her better. That afternoon, I donated half my clothes. I rearranged the furniture. I cooked her favorite pasta, even though it made too much for one. I took a walk without my phone and paid attention to the way the wind moved through the trees. And when I got home, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Taped to the back of the last cabinet, barely hanging on, was a tiny square of paper. Another note. It was barely the size of a sticky note, yellowed slightly around the edges, curling like it had been there for months. Maybe it had. Maybe she'd left it long before she ever moved out. The handwriting was unmistakably hers, quick, casual, the kind she used when writing grocery lists or captions on birthday cards. It simply said, "You always leave the light on in here." I stared at it, blinking. The cabinet was where we used to keep snacks. She hated that I never turned off the little undershelf light inside. Wasting electricity, she used to tease. And attracting ghost ants. I'd roll my eyes and say, it helps me see the chips faster. It was a dumb, recurring joke. One of the quiet threads in the fabric of our daily life. I hadn't turned on that light in weeks. Not since she left. And yet, I reached up and flipped the switch. The soft glow filled the cabinet, warm and familiar. I smiled, then closed the door gently. I didn't take the note down. I left it taped there, like a time capsule. A small, quiet way she still existed in this space. Later that evening, I sat on the balcony with a notebook in my lap. Not a laptop, not my phone. Just paper and pen. I started to write, not to her, but to myself. I wrote about what it meant to stay. To love someone while you're still figuring out how to love yourself. To lose gently. To remember even when it hurts. And to choose to grow in the cracks grief leaves behind. I wrote about the baby, even though I didn't know what it would have been like. I wrote about how we might have held them, how they might have looked like her, or laughed like me. And I cried for that version of the future that had lived only in the wings of our relationship. But I didn't drown in it. I just let it sit with me. Not as a regret, but as a reminder. Grief and hope can hold hands sometimes. You just have to let them. Around midnight, I got a call. From a number I didn't know. I didn't answer. Let it go to voicemail. But something about it felt off. The number wasn't random, it was familiar. Too familiar. I played the message. Static, then silence. Then a voice I hadn't heard in years. My brother. Only, he died 5 years ago. I replayed it twice. It was definitely him. Hey, the voice said, scratchy but real. I don't know if this'll reach you, but I think it's time you remembered what happened. My stomach dropped. My brother. The one I'd lost in a car accident. The one whose name no one mentioned anymore. The one I'd never really grieved. My hands went cold. Because I suddenly remembered something else. There was another memory I'd once asked to forget. The realization hit like a wave that had been building for years, quiet, untraceable, until it crashed into me all at once. I had gone to the clinic. Not recently. Not with Jess. Years ago. After my brother died. The memory came back in slivers at first, then all at once, sitting in a dim room with a woman in a gray blazer, filling out a form I barely remember signing. I'd been a mess. A shell. The accident hadn't just taken my brother, it had taken my ability to function. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't look at cars without shaking. I told myself I was coping. But the truth? I was unraveling. Then someone, maybe a friend, maybe a stranger on an online grief forum, mentioned something. If there's one moment you can't live with, there are services. That's what they called them. Services. Not clinics. Not memory erasure. Not anything that sounded real. I remember the sterile hallway. The flickering light near the check-in. The clipboard. The coffee that tasted like cardboard. I remember saying the words. I want to forget the day I saw him in the hospital. I want to forget the call. The moment I heard the words. The tech had nodded. That's common, she said, like I was just ordering off a menu. And then they did it. A procedure. Non-invasive. A blur of light, sound, suggestion. I don't know what they did exactly, but it worked. I came home days later feeling lighter. Numb, but functioning. I told everyone I was healing. I believed it. But now, hearing my brother's voice on that voicemail, it cracked something wide open. Because I hadn't just lost him. I'd lost the last real memory of him. Not the good ones. The final one. His face in that hospital bed. The last thing he said to me. I deleted it. Like a file I couldn't bear to carry. And now, someone had brought it back. I sat on the couch, shaking. The voicemail had no number I could trace. I called it. Deadline. I Googled. Searched forums. Old emails. And then I found it. Buried deep in an email account I hadn't touched in years. One message, flagged, unread. Dated 5 years ago. Sent the day before I went to the clinic. From him. The subject line read, "If you ever forget me." My throat tightened. I clicked. The email had no text. Just an attachment. A video. I stared at it for what felt like an hour before hitting play. It opened with a familiar smirk. My brother. Sitting in his old hoodie. Hair a mess. The background clearly our parents' kitchen. "If you're watching this," he said, "it means you finally remembered you forgot me." He grinned. Kinda poetic, huh? My chest caved in. The grief I'd dodged for 5 years hit me all at once. But I didn't stop the video. I watched. "I'm not mad," he said, the corners of his mouth twitching like he was holding back something between a joke and a warning. "Okay, maybe I am. A little. Because I knew you'd do something like this. You always hated pain more than truth. And I get it. I do. You always were the fixer, the one who patched everyone else up. But you never let yourself bleed." His voice cracked just slightly on that last word. He looked down for a second, then back at the camera. "The day before the accident, we fought. Over something stupid. Do you remember?" "I didn't. Not yet. You said I never took anything seriously. I said you took everything too seriously. And then I left. You slammed the door. You didn't text back. I didn't either." He paused. "And then I died." My breath hitched. That was the moment I had erased. That was the crack in my memory where the pain had slipped through and disappeared. "But before I left that day," he continued, "I recorded this. Because even though we were mad, I wanted to say something in case I didn't get the chance later. I know, melodramatic, right? But something told me, maybe you'd need to hear it." His eyes softened. "You were always the best of us. Even when you couldn't see it. And whatever you're doing now, whatever weight you're carrying, I need you to know something." He leaned closer to the camera. "You didn't fail me. That fight? It didn't mean anything. The accident wasn't your fault. My death wasn't your responsibility. You didn't kill me by being angry. You didn't ruin anything. You were just human. And I loved you. Every version of you. Even the one that tried to forget me. I couldn't stop the tears this time. I let them come, messy and quiet, pooling onto my shirt as the video kept playing. But you can't live in a memory hole forever, he said. You can't build a life on things you chose not to remember. Because eventually, they come back. And when they do, you better be ready to feel everything you buried. He reached for the camera, smiling that crooked smile of his. So feel it, all right? Let it suck. Let it sting. And then let it go. You've got too much life left to waste on ghosts. The screen went black. I sat in silence for a long time. The kind of silence that doesn't demand anything, just sits beside you like a friend who knows how to be still. My brother had left me a lifeline, a message from the edge, and I had finally pulled it back in. I closed the laptop, but I didn't feel numb. I felt full, broken open, but whole in a new way. I stood up, walked to the bathroom mirror, and looked at myself. Eyes red, face raw, but honest. And for the first time in years, I whispered, I forgive you. I wasn't sure if I was saying it to myself, or to him, or to Jess. Maybe all three. Maybe that's what healing is, learning to speak kindly to every version of yourself that tried to survive. I turned out the light, and that night, I slept without waking once. The next morning, everything looked the same. Same kitchen, same coffee mug, same crack in the tile I kept meaning to fix. But something had shifted. The air felt lighter. Not in a dramatic, life is fixed way, but like I could finally exhale without holding something back. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through contacts I hadn't touched in months. I found Jess's name, hovered for a second, then moved on. Instead, I opened my notes app and typed what I want to remember. I made a list, not of accomplishments, not goals, just moments. Little, ordinary things that I didn't want to forget. Jess laughing in the grocery store when I mispronounced quinoa. My brother yelling at the TV during every football game like the players could hear him. The way the sun poured through our old kitchen window on Sundays. I typed until the screen blurred. Then I saved it. I wasn't sure what came next. I wasn't healed in the tidy, cinematic sense. But I was awake. And that felt new. That evening, I walked down to the corner cafe, one Jess and I used to avoid because the barista always spelled our names wrong. I ordered coffee, gave a fake name just for fun, sat by the window, watched people move through the world. It hit me, somewhere between the first and second sip, life wasn't about fixing what had already happened. It was about deciding what to carry forward. I could carry pain, sure, but I could carry love too. Later that night, I got a text from a number I didn't know. Just one line. Thank you for remembering. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I looked around my apartment. It still echoed in places. Still had missing pieces. But it didn't feel haunted anymore. I opened a drawer, pulled out the pink spatula, and set it on the counter. Maybe tomorrow I'd make pancakes again. Not because I was sad. Not because I missed her. But because that's what healing sometimes looks like. Using the spatula that once made you cry and flipping something golden on the other side. Before bed, I took one last look at my phone. Another message had arrived. An email. No subject. From the same string of characters that had sent the first one. I opened it. There was only an image. A photo. I tapped. And what I saw nearly made me drop the phone. It was a screenshot of me. Sitting on the kitchen floor. From just a few nights ago. Pancakes in my lap. Head against the cabinets. But it wasn't taken by Jess. Or anyone I knew. The timestamp was exact. Down to the second. And in the corner of the image, barely visible, was a figure in the reflection of the microwave door. Watching. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light. I squinted, zoomed in, tried to rationalize the blurry silhouette in the microwave door, maybe a shadow, maybe a distortion. But the outline was unmistakable. A person. Standing just outside the frame of my memory. Watching me. The timestamp didn't lie. It was from that night, the night I sat on the floor with Jess's pancakes, played her playlist, and whispered into a space I thought was mine alone. My hands trembled as I set the phone down. I checked the locks. Closed the blinds. Looked out the peephole twice. But there was no one there. Just quiet hallway shadows and the faint hum of distant traffic. I sat back down, phone in hand, heart thudding in my throat. I opened the email again. Re-examined every pixel. Whoever took that photo had been in the apartment, or just outside it. I'd been alone. Or I thought I had. Beneath the photo was a line of text I hadn't seen before. Gray, small, almost missed. Memory is a gift, not a guarantee. No name. No signature. I tried to reply. Mailer demon error. Address invalid. I backed out and tried to trace the IP. Nothing. Burner account. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat with the photo pulled up beside me, staring at the ghost of someone I didn't recognize, or maybe didn't remember. It made me think of the clinic again. The memory Jess erased. The one I erased of my brother. What else had I let go of? What other pieces of my life had slipped through the cracks of forgetfulness I willingly bought? The next day, I dug deeper. I called the clinic. Disconnected. Website archived. A Reddit thread I'd once read was now marked deleted. Every digital footprint tied to them was gone. Erased. Like they never existed. Like I never walked through that door. But I knew I had. I remembered now. And that's what scared me most. Not just that I had forgotten something so crucial, but that someone else hadn't. Someone was watching. Someone knew what I chose to forget. And they wanted me to know it too. The box Jess left, the letters, the baby, my brother's video, maybe they weren't isolated stories. Maybe they were stitches in a larger fabric. Maybe healing had pulled the thread too far. I stood by the window that evening, phone in one hand, coffee in the other. For a second, I thought I saw movement in the building across the street. A flicker. A shape. Someone pulling back a curtain. I raised my phone. Snapped a picture. Nothing. Just glass. Just sky. Just the feeling of being seen. I don't know who's watching. Or why. But I know this. I remember now. And that might be the most dangerous thing I've ever done.